My name is Maya Ellis. They didn't have to call me a failure. I read it in their silence. At every dinner table I wasn't invited to. In every photo I was cropped out of. In every polite nod that came with averted eyes. They said Landon was the legacy, the face of the family. I was just the girl who kept disappearing. Into wreckage, into recreation centers, into smoke. They thought I stayed quiet out of shame. But I stayed quiet because no one wanted to hear the truth. Until someone finally did. And when he said my name, not to use me, not to claim me, but to honor me, the story they'd built around me collapsed. Because what they didn't know is that I never needed their table. I had already walked through fire, and I survived. So if you've ever been erased, not loudly but slowly, not violently but thoroughly, if you've ever watched them clap for someone else's spotlight while you held the match that lit the room, this story is yours too. Drop your city in the comments. Like, subscribe. Because sometimes the real hero isn't the one on stage, it's the one who walks away and never looks back. The kids clapped as the mock smoke cleared. Their laughter echoed across the concrete walls of the rec center, still faintly charred at the edges from the days when this place had been just a shell. I held up the fire blanket one last time, showing them how to throw it over a stove fire and duck low through heat. A little girl with pigtails tugged on my sleeve. "Miss Maya, have you ever been in a real fire?" I smiled, gentle but guarded. "A few." Their parents stood along the wall, eyes on their phones. I handed out little red plastic helmets and paper certificates that read, "Junior Fire Hero." They loved that. Their parents barely looked up. After the last family left, I stacked the folding chairs, wiped sweat from the back of my neck, and locked the doors behind me. Outside, the October air had that dry, crackling scent, like cedar just before it burns. My boots thudded on the metal staircase up to my apartment. The whole building smelled like motor oil and damp rags from the mechanic's shop below, but it was home. Small, yes, but mine. The kitchenette hummed as I filled the kettle. A chipped mug waited beside it, the words, "Heroes wear ash," almost worn off. I sat at the wobbly table, stretching my back. The workshop had gone well. It always did. But that question lingered. Always did. I pulled open the second drawer of the side table. Inside lay two things I hadn't touched in years. My last department-issued medal from the Bridger Canyon fire, still in its case. And beneath it, the uncashed check. $300,000. A gesture of appreciation, the state had called it. The medal caught the light. I ran my finger along its edge, then pulled out the check. Folded once, slightly yellowed. I stared at it like I had 1,000 times before. I never deposited it. Not out of pride. Not really, I just couldn't. The kettle whistled, breaking the silence. I poured water over the tea bag, the scent of chamomile rising like old comfort. My phone buzzed. A message from Casey. "You okay? Heard you had a good turnout." I tapped a quick response. "Yeah, just tired," and set it down again. Then another buzz. "Mom, dinner at the Four Seasons this Friday. Landon's gala, please come. Dress nicely. And please, no stories about your past. This is Landon's night." The words hovered there, cold and clinical. I hadn't heard from her in months, not since last Christmas when I dropped off a donation in their name at the Fire Victims Fund, and she'd replied with nothing more than a thumbs-up emoji. Even that had felt generous. I set the phone down, opened the closet. Tucked behind my jackets and a few uniforms I never wore was the one thing I'd sworn never to pull out again. My turnout coat from Bridger, blackened at the sleeves, still faintly smelling of smoke like the memories it carried. Thick, choking, relentless. I hadn't worn it since that night. I held it for a long time. Let the weight of it settle in my hands. Then I folded it carefully and laid it across the foot of the bed. My thumb hovered over the screen. I could say no. I should say no. Instead, I typed, "I'll come." Sent. The check was still on the table, catching the edge of the lamplight. I stared at it, like I had 1,000 times before, still wondering why I kept it all these years. I didn't plan to be noticed. I only planned to survive the evening. The lights of the Regency shimmered like a mirage as I stepped out of the cab. My boots had been traded for black heels I hadn't worn in years. They pinched. The navy dress Casey had convinced me to borrow felt wrong on my shoulders, like someone else's story. Inside, the ballroom glowed with chandeliers the size of small satellites. Gold trim, glass tables, and walls so white they hurt my eyes. The gala had been curated down to the thread, honoring heroes in healthcare and emergency response. It was Landon's night. Of course it was. I gave my name to a woman with a headset and clipboard. She scanned her list, lips tight, then nodded toward a table near the far wall. I found my seat, table 19, behind a potted plant and near the kitchen doors. Close enough to hear the hum of waitstaff, far enough to be forgotten. At the center of the room, my brother stood radiant beneath a halo of camera flashes. Landon Ellis, youngest trauma surgeon at Houston Memorial, rising star in surgical robotics, and tonight's honoree. His tuxedo fit perfectly. So did the spotlight. My parents flanked him, Karen's pearls gleaming, Charles beaming like he'd personally sculpted Landon from marble. None of them saw me. I adjusted my seat, sipped water, tried not to tug at the hem of the dress. A waiter came by. Polite smile. No small talk. Chicken or fish? I chose neither. The ballroom dimmed slightly. A voice announced Landon's name. Applause swelled like a tidal wave. He took the stage with practiced ease, thanking the board, the donors, his colleagues. "I stand here only because of the team who taught me," he said, gesturing to the front table. "And of course, my incredible family." My mother wiped a tear. I felt nothing. "And," he added, "to all those who run toward the flames, not away. This night is yours too." The applause roared again. It was polished, sincere, practiced. Then a hand touched my shoulder. "Excuse me," said a quiet voice. I turned. A man, silver-haired but upright, in a tailored navy suit and faint scars across his left jawline. His gaze fixed on me like he'd seen a ghost. Dr. Malcolm Reyes. I'd seen his photo on the hospital's website. Landon's boss. "Were you," he said, voice almost breaking. "Bridger fire? 2017?" The room blurred. My throat tightened. I nodded. Just barely. His eyes widened, then softened into something I hadn't seen in years. Recognition without pity. "I was trapped under a beam," he whispered. "Woke up in a field hospital 3 days later. They told me a firefighter dragged me out. Said she disappeared before they could even thank her." He stepped back, looked me over like someone rewinding time in their mind. Then, inexplicably, impossibly, he turned toward the stage. Landon was still smiling, unaware. So was everyone else. Dr. Reyes walked to the edge of the platform, signaled to the announcer. A microphone was handed to him. The crowd, still buzzing, slowly fell quiet as he tapped the mic. "Forgive the interruption," he said. "But before we continue, I need to acknowledge someone here tonight." He paused, eyes scanning until they found mine again. "This woman saved my life," he said, voice steady. "She never asked for anything, not even credit. Until now, I never knew her name." It was as if the oxygen had been sucked from the room. Heads turned, forks stopped midair, chairs creaked. Even Landon's grin faltered. All eyes landed on me. I didn't rise, didn't speak. I only nodded, once. Overnight, I became valuable. Not because I changed, but because someone else finally said my name out loud. The next morning, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Missed calls, group texts, a voicemail from my mother that began with, "We're so proud of you, sweetheart," and ended with an invitation to Sunday dinner. Just us, nothing formal. As if there had ever been anything casual about dinners in the Ellis house. I arrived just after 6. The porch light glowed like a spotlight over the same red door I'd walked through 1,000 times. Karen opened it before I could knock, arms outstretched, smile wide and bright. "There's our hero," she cooed, pulling me into a hug that smelled faintly of expensive perfume and forced sentiment. "Dinner's almost ready. Your favorite. Chicken noodle with those little carrots you used to fish out one by one." The dining room looked frozen in time. Same white tablecloth, same glass bowl of wax fruit on the sideboard. My seat, the one by the window, was empty, waiting. Aunt June and Cousin Derek were already seated, wine glasses in hand. Charles offered a warm nod from the head of the table, and Landon, ever the centerpiece, rose to pull out my chair. "How does it feel to be famous?" he asked with a wink. I offered a tight smile. "Unfamiliar." Dinner unfolded like a rehearsed play. Compliments passed like side dishes. Aunt June marveled at how gracefully I handled the moment. Derek chimed in. "You always had that quiet strength, even when we were kids." The soup arrived. Too hot, but good. It surprised me. Conversation circled around the gala. Landon recounted his speech, the part where he honored those who risk everything without asking for a thing. Karen dabbed her eyes again. Then came the turn. "You know," Landon began, swirling his wine, "Dr. Reyes and I were talking afterward. He's reviewing my grant proposal. Big potential. Robotics in rural trauma centers. Just needs a bit more capital." I didn't look up. Karen placed her spoon down gently. "You still have that grant money, don't you, Maya? From the state? I mean, even a portion. It could go to something meaningful. Something that helps others." I set my spoon down too. Slower. "It's not a family asset," I said. "It's mine." The silence that followed was brief, but loud. Landon leaned back, his smile thinning. "We all rise together, Maya. That's what family does." The words hovered in the air. Too smooth, too practiced. Like he'd used them before. I held his gaze. Then where was everyone when I couldn't hold a spoon? Karen's lips parted. Perhaps to deny, perhaps to cry. But I stood before she could say a word. "I think I'll go," I said. "Thanks for dinner." No one followed me out. Back home, the stairwell to my apartment felt heavier than usual. I reached the top, fumbled with my keys, and froze. A bouquet sat neatly at my doorstep. Stargazer lilies and something soft and wild in between, tucked inside a note on thick cream cardstock. "You're the light, Maya. Don't forget that." Landon. The moment they couldn't use me, they turned, just like they always had. It started with a subject line. "Hero or hoax?" buried in my inbox between a fire drill reminder and an HVAC invoice. I stared at it for a full minute before clicking. Local blogger. Unverified. But the comments below were already piling up. Some praising, some skeptical, and then one that linked to a Reddit thread titled, "The Bridger Fire, What They Don't Tell You." Inside, a grainy photo. Me, collapsed near the debris. Helmet off, soot-caked, eyes dazed. And beneath it, she froze. Everyone else acted. She just stood there. I sat back, heart thudding. The picture wasn't public. It wasn't even from the front lines. It was from the internal hospital file taken later when I was too weak to stand. Someone had accessed that archive and twisted it. I called Casey. "You seeing this?" I asked, barely breathing. She had. "Reddit's brutal. But Maya, that photo? It's inside access. Nobody but hospital staff could pull that." "And guess who has friends at that hospital?" I muttered. "You thinking Landon?" She said it gently, but not surprised. "I'm thinking I need answers." I dialed Dr. Reyes. He picked up after the second ring. "I was going to call you," he said. "You saw the leak?" "Yes, and more." He paused. "That file wasn't online until last week. It came from a secure internal server. Only senior admin and one or two surgeons had that kind of clearance. I didn't need him to finish. Landon, I said flatly. I can't say for sure, Reyes replied, but it fits. He was in my office last week. Said he was helping media verify facts. Told me he wanted to protect your story. I swallowed hard. Protect it? By undermining it? Smiles are cheap, Reyes said quietly, especially when you're finally useful. I ended the call and stood, dazed, pacing my small apartment. The medals, the articles, they all meant nothing now. Just tools. Properties. I walked to the drawer, the same one with the check still inside. Except it was open, slightly ajar. My breath caught. I hadn't left it like that. Slowly, I pulled it open. The envelope with the check, gone. My backup documents? Gone. I backed away, heart pounding. Then I saw it. My spare laptop still open on the desk, USB port half cracked. The room smelled faintly of aftershave and printer toner. Landon's brand. I stepped closer. A greasy smudge marked the USB slot. My stomach turned. It wasn't just media manipulation. He'd been here. Inside my home. Inside my life. The check was gone, but something else was stolen too. The story I'd never told anyone. The silence I had fought to preserve. And he was already rewriting it. He tried to rewrite my story, but I wrote it in ash. And ash remembers. Dr. Reyes met me early before the hospital buzzed to life. His office was dark oak and thick blinds, a room meant for quiet conversations and unspoken regrets. He locked the door behind me and handed over a matte black flash drive. I made a copy of everything I could find. He said, "You'll want to start with the Bridger internal report, page 17. I sat, slipped the drive into my laptop, and opened the file. Bridger Fire, Incident Memo, November 18th, 2017. Firefighter Maya Ellis located and extracted Dr. Malcolm Reyes under collapse risk conditions. Solo entry. Time, 3:12 to 3:21. Deemed critical to survival of subject. I stared at the text until my eyes blurred. That report was never meant to be buried, he said quietly, but nobody ever pulled it up again. Until now. I closed the laptop. They buried me with it. Reyes exhaled, voice low. You're not buried, just quiet. But quiet doesn't mean erased. From there, things moved faster. I found Nora Chen's name on a local pro bono network. The email I sent was a shot in the dark, but within hours, she replied, Subject, I remember you. Let's talk. We met that evening at a law clinic off South Lamar, the windows covered in sticky notes and student flyers. She walked in holding a manila folder and a smile I hadn't seen in over a decade. You taught that first aid boot camp at Mapleview, she said before I could speak. I was the kid who fainted at the CPR dummy. I blinked. That was you? Yep. I owe you. And I believe in receipts. She opened the folder. I've already reviewed the Bridger memo. Solid. We'll file a defamation and unauthorized data access complaint by end of week. I also reached out to the Texas Press Guild. Once this hits, they'll push a correction cascade. I barely managed a nod. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, she said. We're not done. Later that night, I sat in a corner booth at Willow and Pine, my usual coffee shop, now filled with winter garlands and cinnamon steam. A girl waved from across the room, her dark curls now streaked with blonde. Lexi. She used to attend my workshops. Now, apparently, she was studying criminal justice at UT. I saw what they did to you, she said, sliding her phone across the table. Thought you should see this. Screenshots. Dozens. One message thread stood out. Landon Ellis. Upload the image with the helmet off. Make it look messy. She won't fight it. User P. Forchfire replied, Done. Same rate? Lexi looked at me. He paid a mod to see the thread. The PayPal receipt links back to an old foundation account in his name. My throat went dry. You're sure? I whispered. Positive. That night, I didn't sleep. I wrote instead. Letters to every outlet that called me a hoax. I attached Reyes's memo, the screenshots, in a single line. I will no longer be silent for your convenience. Then I drove, back to Bridger's ruins, or what was left. The community hall was just a scarred lot now, ringed in chain link and wild grass. The sky hung gray and cold. I set up my phone against a rusted hydrant. Hit record. My name is Maya Ellis. I didn't ask to be a hero. I didn't chase credit. But I won't let a liar write my legacy. The wind carried the words out across the ash. I let it. By the time I returned home, my phone buzzed. Landon. I watched it ring, then answered. His voice was calm, rehearsed. You really want to do this, Maya? I said nothing, just raised the phone and hit record. They invited me back to the table, not to apologize, but to contain me. The State Ethics Commission building looked like it had been designed to intimidate. Stark concrete, fluorescent lighting, a podium too small for the weight of the stories spoken from it. Yet as I stepped inside, flanked by Nora on one side and a quiet nod from Dr. Reyes on the other, I didn't feel small. I felt steady. The room was packed. Reporters, students from my workshops, a row of first responders in uniform, and on the opposite bench, Landon, suit-tailored, smile plastic. Karen and Charles sat behind him, stiff as statues. Their eyes slid off me like I was glass. Nora stood first. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Slide by slide, she laid out the facts. The leaked photo, the mod payment trail, the grant fraud, the deleted security footage from my apartment, the tampered accounts. Each click of her remote was another nail, measured and irrefutable. Landon leaned forward, interjecting only once. This is a witch hunt. But then the final witness stepped up, a calm, older man with wire-framed glasses. Professor Joel Mannheim, he said. Lexi is my student. I reviewed her evidence chain myself and confirmed the payments came from a foundation under Mr. Ellis's discretionary control. The silence was cold. Then it was my turn. I stood, hands unclenched, throat dry but even. This isn't about revenge, I said. It's about record. I've lived with silence long enough, letting others speak for me, letting their versions win. But legacy isn't a handout. You earn it. In the moment when no one's watching, I stepped back. No dramatics, no tears. The panel recessed briefly, then returned with resolution. Landon was to be removed from the State Hospital Advisory Board, his research funding suspended. A public censure would follow. Karen reached for me as I passed. You don't have to destroy him, she whispered. Please, Maya, we're still a family. I didn't stop walking. I already went public. Later that week, I stood at a different podium, one outside, wrapped in strings of fairy lights, surrounded by folding chairs and laughter. The fire prep event was full of kids and their parents, a mix of chaos and joy that smelled like cocoa and wet leaves. A little girl tugged my coat sleeve. Are you Maya? She asked. I nodded. She handed me a folded paper, messy with crayon. A firefighter, standing tall, arms outstretched like wings. My name scrawled in orange above. You're my hero, she said. I smiled. Not the public kind. The kind that happens in the chest, like oxygen returning after smoke. I stayed for a while, helped distribute kits, took pictures, watched the sun set behind a canopy of string lights. And when it was over, I walked alone past the last of the guests, past the food trucks and folding tables, past Landon standing with a camera crew who now ignored him. I didn't wave. I didn't look back. Just one sentence under my breath, quiet but sure. You don't owe them healing. They tried to silence her with shame, then spotlight, then slander. But none of it held. When the truth surfaced, it didn't roar. It stood calmly and let the lies collapse around it, Justice doesn't always wear a uniform or carry a gavel. Sometimes it's a woman who refuses to disappear. Like ash after fire, the truth clings, and it never forgets.